Long, long ago, in the time before time had a name, all the stories in the world belonged to one being. Not to humans, not to animals, not even to the wisest elders. All stories belonged to Nyame, the great sky god who ruled the heavens from his golden palace among the clouds. But this is not a story about the sky god. This is a story about a spider. A very small, very clever spider named Anansi. And this is the tale of how that tiny spider outsmarted the most powerful god and became the owner of every story ever told. Before we begin, let me tell you about Anansi. He comes from the Akan people of Ghana in West Africa, specifically from the Ashanti tribe. Anansi is what we call a trickster, someone who uses their wit and intelligence rather than strength or power. The Ashanti people have been telling Anansi stories for hundreds, if not thousands of years. These stories traveled across the ocean during the slave trade and spread to the Caribbean, to Jamaica, to parts of America, where Anansi inspired other trickster characters. In those ancient days, Anansi lived on Earth among the humans. He watched them go about their daily lives, working in the fields, cooking their meals, caring for their children. And he noticed something. The humans looked sad. Their faces were blank. Their days were long and empty. Anansi wondered why this was so. These humans had food to eat. They had homes to shelter them. They had families who loved them. Yet something was missing from their lives. Something that would bring them joy, hope, and meaning. Then Anansi remembered something. He remembered the palace of Nyame, the sky god, high up in the heavens. And he remembered that in that palace were magical things called stories. Stories that could make anyone laugh. Stories that could make anyone cry. Stories that could teach wisdom and bring communities together. Stories that could light up the darkest nights and make even the hardest work feel lighter. That is it, thought Anansi. The humans need stories. They need something to give their lives color and meaning. So Anansi, being a spider, began to spin. He spun and spun and spun a web that reached up, up, up into the sky. The web was strong and silvery, glinting in the sunlight like a ladder made of moonbeams. Anansi climbed. He climbed so high that the tallest trees became tiny as blades of grass below him. He climbed so high that the rivers looked like thin blue threads. He climbed so high that entire villages became nothing but dots on the ground. He climbed until his 8 legs ached and his body grew tired. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Anansi reached the gates of Nyame's palace. The palace was more magnificent than anything on earth. Its walls were made of pure gold that shone brighter than the sun. Its towers reached even higher into the endless sky. And inside, piled high in every room, were the stories. Millions and millions of stories. Nyame sat upon his throne of clouds and thunder. He was enormous, as tall as 10 elephants stacked on top of each other. His eyes blazed like lightning. His voice rumbled like drums. When he saw the tiny spider standing before him, he could not help but smile. "Anansi," said Nyame in his booming voice. "Welcome to my palace. Have you come to hear one of my stories?" "Great Nyame," Anansi replied, bowing low. "I have come with a request. The humans down on earth live such difficult lives. They work from sunrise to sunset. They face hardship and struggle. But they have no stories to comfort them, to teach them, to bring them joy. I was hoping, great sky god, that you might share some of your stories with them." Nyame leaned back on his throne and laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, but it was not kind either. It was the laugh of someone who had heard such requests many times before. "Anansi, Anansi, Anansi," said Nyame. "Do you know how many have asked me for my stories? Entire kingdoms have come before me, offering gold and jewels. Powerful chiefs have offered me their wealth. Whole cities have offered me anything I desired. And yet, none of them could pay the price I demanded, asked Anansi. Nyam's eyes glinted. He folded his massive arms across his chest and spoke. My price is this. Bring me 4 things, 4 creatures that no one has ever been able to capture. Bring me these, and all my stories will be yours. And what are these 4 things? Asked Anansi. Nyam smiled, showing teeth like mountain peaks. First, bring me Onini, the great python who lives deep in the jungle. He is longer than 10 grown men lying head to foot. His scales are harder than stone. He can swallow a goat whole without even chewing. No warrior has ever dared to approach him. Second, bring me Osebo, the leopard with teeth as sharp as spears. He moves like a shadow through the forest. His claws can tear through the toughest hide. He fears nothing and no one. Third, bring me Mmoboro, the hornet swarm whose stings burn like needles of fire. They are many and they are angry. Their venom can drop a grown elephant. And fourth, bring me Mmoatia, the fairy of the forest. She is invisible when she chooses to be. She is mischievous and clever. No one has ever caught her. Nyam expected Anansi to give up right there. After all, Anansi was just a spider. Powerless. How could such a tiny creature capture the most dangerous animals in the world? But Anansi straightened all 8 of his legs and declared, Very well, great Nyam. I will bring you these 4 creatures. And when I do, all your stories will belong to me, and I will share them with all the people of earth. Nyam threw back his head and laughed until the clouds shook. We shall see, little spider. We shall see. And with that, Anansi climbed back down his web to earth, ready to begin the impossible tasks. When Anansi arrived home, he went straight to his wife, Oso. Now, Oso was as clever as Anansi, perhaps even more so. Together, they sat and thought about how a small spider could capture such fearsome creatures. You cannot use strength, my husband, said Oso. You have none. You cannot use speed, she continued. The leopard is faster. You cannot use venom, she added. The hornets have more. So what can I use? Asked Anansi. So smiled. You must use the one thing you have more of than any creature on earth. Your cleverness. And so, together, Anansi and Oso made their plans. The next morning, Anansi went into the forest. He found a long, sturdy branch and cut some strong vines. Then he walked toward the place where Onini the great python lived, near a dark pool surrounded by ancient trees. As he walked, Anansi talked to himself, but loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. My wife is wrong. She is absolutely wrong. I know she is. Anansi shook his head dramatically. Onini is definitely longer than this branch. I am sure of it. Now, Onini the python had been sleeping in the sun. His massive coils wrapped around the base of a tree. But when he heard someone talking about him, his great head rose up. What is this? Hissed Onini. What are you saying about me, spider? Oh, said Anansi, pretending to be surprised. Onini, I did not see you there. Please forgive me. I was just having an argument with my wife. An argument? About me? The python's tongue flicked in and out. Onini was very vain and loved when others talked about him. Yes, sighed Anansi. You see, my wife claims that you are not as long as this branch here. But I told her. Also, Onini is the longest, most magnificent creature in the entire forest. Of course he is longer than any branch. But she would not believe me. Onini's pride swelled up inside him like a balloon. Your wife doubts my length. This is an insult. I am the longest creature in the world. I will prove it to you right now." "Oh, would you?" asked Anansi. "That would settle our argument once and for all." "Lay that branch on the ground," commanded Onini. Anansi did as he was told, placing the long branch in a straight line on the forest floor. Onini slithered over and began to stretch himself out beside the branch. He stretched and stretched, making himself as long as possible. "Am I longer than the branch?" asked Onini proudly. "Well," said Anansi, walking up and down, "it is hard to say. You keep moving your head and your tail. How can I measure you properly if you keep wriggling about?" "You are right," said Onini. "Tie me to the branch so I cannot move. Then you will see that I am longer." "Are you sure?" asked Anansi. "Of course I am sure. Do it now." So Anansi took his vines and tied Onini's head to one end of the branch. Then he walked along the python's body, tying him at several points. Finally, he tied Onini's tail to the other end of the branch. When Onini was completely tied up, Anansi laughed. "You are indeed very long, Onini. But now you belong to the sky god." Onini realized his mistake and thrashed about, but it was too late. The vines held firm. Anansi lifted the branch with the python tied to it, and began the long journey to the sky god's palace. As he climbed his web back up to the heavens, Anansi sang, "One down, 3 to go. The stories will soon be mine." When Anansi reached Nyame's palace, he laid the python at the sky god's feet. Nyame could not believe his eyes. "You have captured Onini the python. Impossible. But here he is before me." "Very well, Anansi. You have completed the first task. But there are 3 more. Do not become too proud." Anansi bowed and returned to earth. He and Oso talked about how to capture Osebo the leopard. "Osebo is strong," said Oso. "Osebo is fast. Osebo is fierce. You cannot approach him directly." "Then I must make him come to me," said Anansi. That very night, Anansi went into the forest and found the path that Osebo used when going to the watering hole. In the middle of this path, Anansi dug a deep pit. The pit was so deep that if you fell into it, you would never be able to climb out. Anansi then covered the mouth of the pit with branches and leaves and grass, making it look exactly like the rest of the path. When he was satisfied with his work, he went home to sleep. That night, Osebo the leopard went hunting. His powerful muscles rippled under his spotted coat. His green eyes glowed in the darkness. He was the king of the night, feared by all. As Osebo walked down his usual path toward the watering hole, he suddenly felt the ground give way beneath his paws. With a startled roar, he fell down into the deep pit. Crash! Osebo landed at the bottom, shaken and angry. He tried to climb the walls, but they were too smooth and too high. He tried to leap out, but the pit was too deep. He roared in fury, but there was no one to hear him. Early the next morning, Anansi came to check his trap. He crept to the edge of the pit and looked down. "Oh my!" said Anansi, pretending to be shocked. "Osebo, what are you doing down there?" "What does it look like, you fool?" snarled Osebo. "I have fallen into a trap. Get me out of here at once." "Get you out?" said Anansi thoughtfully. "But how do I know you will not eat me as soon as I help you?" "I give you my word as a leopard," growled Osebo. "I will not harm you. Just get me out." "Well," said Anansi slowly, "I suppose I could help you. Wait here." "Where else would I go?" roared Osebo. Anansi went into the forest and found a tall, flexible sapling tree. He bent the top of the tree over the pit and tied it down with his spider silk. Then he spun a long, strong cord and attached one end to the bent tree and let the other end dangle down into the pit. "Osebo," called Anansi, "grab onto this cord and I will pull you up." Osebo, desperate to escape, grabbed the cord with his powerful jaws. As soon as he did, Anansi cut the silk holding the tree down. The tree sprang upward with tremendous force, yanking Osebo right out of the pit and high into the air. While Osebo dangled helplessly from the tree, confused and dizzy, Anansi quickly spun more silk around the leopard's body, wrapping him up tight like a fly in a web. "You tricked me," yelled Osebo. "I did," agreed Anansi cheerfully. "And now you belong to the sky god." Once again, Anansi climbed his web to Nyame's palace, this time carrying Osebo the leopard wrapped in silk. Nyame stared in amazement. "You have done it again, little spider. First the python, now the leopard. Truly you are more clever than I imagined. But there are still 2 more creatures to capture. The hornets and the fairy are the most difficult of all." Anansi bowed and descended back to earth, singing, "2 down, 2 to go. The stories are nearly mine." When Anansi returned home, he thought long and hard about the hornets. Mmoboro was not just one creature. It was a swarm. Thousands of hornets, each with a sting like fire. How could he capture them all? What do hornets fear most? Anansi asked his wife. "Rain," said Oso. "Hornets cannot fly in the rain. Their wings get wet and heavy." Anansi smiled. "Then I will bring them rain." The next day, Anansi found a large calabash gourd. He hollowed it out and filled it with water. Then he found a large banana leaf. With these items, he set off for the tree where Mmoboro the hornet swarm had built their nest. When he got close to the tree, Anansi poured some of the water over his own head, getting himself soaking wet. Then he poured the rest of the water all around the tree, making the ground wet and the leaves drip. Then Anansi held the banana leaf over his head like an umbrella and called out, "Oh dear! The rainy season has come early this year. What a terrible storm!" The hornets, hearing this, came buzzing out of their nest to see what was happening. When they saw the wet ground and felt drops of water falling on them, they began to panic. "It is raining," buzzed the hornets. "Our wings will get wet. We will not be able to fly. What shall we do?" "Do not worry, my friends," called Anansi, still holding his leaf umbrella. "I have shelter for you right here. Come into my dry gourd and wait until the rain passes." The hornets, grateful for the offer and frightened of the rain, flew one by one into the calabash gourd. "Thank you, Anansi," they buzzed. "You are very kind." As soon as the last hornet entered the gourd, Anansi quickly plugged the opening with a large leaf and sealed it with his silk web. "You are welcome," laughed Anansi, shaking the gourd. Inside, the hornets buzzed angrily, realizing they had been tricked. For the 3rd time, Anansi climbed to the sky god's palace. This time he brought the calabash gourd filled with angry, buzzing hornets. Nyame could hardly believe what he was seeing. 3. You have captured 3 of the 4. The python, the leopard, and now the hornets. Never in 1,000 years did I think you would succeed. But there is still one more. The fairy Mmoatia. She is the most difficult of all. Many have tried. All have failed. "I will not fail," said Anansi confidently, and he returned to Earth one more time. Mmoatia the fairy was different from all the other creatures. She could turn invisible. She could fly through the air. She was mischievous and clever and nearly impossible to find. Anansi and Oso talked late into the night, trying to think of a plan. "How do you catch something you cannot see?" wondered Anansi. "You make her come to you," said Oso, "and you use her own pride against her." "But how?" So smiled. "Remember the tar baby story." Anansi spent the entire next day carving a beautiful wooden doll. He made it look like a small child, with a sweet face and outstretched arms. But then he covered the entire doll in sticky tar, the kind that sticks to everything it touches and never lets go. He took the doll to a clearing in the forest where fairies were known to play. He set the doll down and hid behind a bush, holding strings attached to the doll so he could make it move. Soon Mmoatia the fairy appeared. She fluttered through the air on her delicate wings, invisible to most eyes, but Anansi's 8 eyes were sharp. When Mmoatia saw the doll, she flew down to investigate. The doll looked so real, so lifelike. "Hello there," called Mmoatia in her tiny musical voice. "What a lovely doll." Anansi pulled the strings, making the doll nod its head slightly, as if it could hear. "Oh," said Mmoatia, delighted. "You can move. How wonderful. Would you like to play with me?" Again Anansi made the doll nod. "Excellent," said Mmoatia. "Let us be friends." But then Anansi pulled the strings in a different way, making the doll turn its back on the fairy. "Why are you turning away?" asked Mmoatia, confused. "That is very rude." The doll said nothing, just kept its back turned. "Hello," said Mmoatia, flying around to face the doll. "I am talking to you. It is impolite to ignore someone." Still the doll said nothing. Mmoatia's face grew red with anger. Fairies are proud creatures, and they do not like to be ignored. "Fine," shouted Mmoatia. "If you will not speak to me politely, I will teach you some manners." And with that, Mmoatia slapped the doll across the face with her right hand. Mac. But her hand stuck fast to the tar. "What?" cried Mmoatia. "Let go of me." She pulled and pulled, but her hand would not come free. So she used her left hand to try to push the doll away. Mac. Now both hands were stuck. "Let me go!" screamed Mmoatia, kicking the doll with her right foot. Mac. Her right foot stuck to the tar. She kicked with her left foot. Mac. Now all 4 limbs were stuck to the tar baby. Mmoatia struggled and fought, but it was no use. She was completely trapped. Anansi came out from behind the bush, laughing. "Mmoatia, Mmoatia," he said. "Your pride has trapped you. Now you belong to the sky god." For the 4th and final time, Anansi climbed his web to the palace of Nyame, carrying the sticky doll with Mmoatia the fairy attached to it. When Nyame saw this, he rose from his throne in shock. His eyes grew wide. His mouth fell open. "You have done it," whispered Nyame. "You have done what no kingdom, no army, no powerful chief could do. You have captured all 4 creatures. Onini the python, Osebo the leopard, Mmoboro the hornets, and Mmoatia the fairy." Nyame stood before his throne and his voice boomed across the heavens like thunder. "Anansi," he declared. "I, Nyame, the sky god, keeper of all stories, do hereby acknowledge that you have paid the price. You have succeeded where kings and warriors have failed. And so, I will keep my bargain." Nyame waved his massive hand, and the doors of his palace flew open. Inside, filling room after room, were the stories. Stories written on leaves. Stories painted on bark. Stories woven into cloth. Stories carved into wood. Millions upon millions of stories, glowing with magic. "From this day forward," proclaimed Nyame in a voice that shook the stars, "all of these stories belong to you, Anansi the spider. And whenever anyone anywhere tells a story, they must acknowledge that it comes from you. From this day until the end of time, all tales shall be known as spider stories." Anansi bowed low before the sky god, his 8 legs trembling with joy. "Thank you, great Nyame," said Anansi. "I promise I will share these stories with all the people of Earth. No one shall be without stories ever again." And so Anansi gathered all the stories in a great box and carried them down his web back to earth. When he reached the villages and the towns, he opened the box and the stories flew out like birds, spreading across the land. The people gathered around as Anansi told them the stories. They laughed at the funny ones. They cried at the sad ones. They learned from the wise ones. They trembled at the scary ones. And they shared them with their children, who shared them with their children, who shared them with their children, on and on through the generations. And to this day, whenever you hear a story, especially in Ghana and across West Africa, it is called a spider story, an Anansism, because they all belong to Anansi, the clever little spider who outsmarted a god.